Hey everybody, we're back again with another opinion and video game review. This time we're going to be going back to the horror genre. I've done Layers of Fear, I did Amnesia the Bunker, I did a couple other horror games, and today we're going to be talking about a game called Killer Frequency by Team 17. I did play this game upon release. I did it for about 2 hours and then I stopped and then I came back to it recently as is similar with the last video I did. I just got caught up with some other stuff. It wasn't really a knock on the game. It was so much again. I had other things I needed to take care of, and then I came back to it. So this came out earlier this year. I want to say back in June or July. It wasn't that long ago, at least for the PlayStation 5 version. So it's a puzzle horror game where you're a radio host. I'm not going to go into any details really, besides what's shown here on screen. There's a killer on the loose, and your job is to help people from getting murdered, prevent them from getting murdered by using your wits. So essentially, that's what you'll be doing the entire time. There is some very loose exploration where you're walking around the studio. Besides that, you're really confined to your actual, set where you're sitting here looking at, things you've collected to bring back to help you prevent people from getting killed or help solve what's going on. So I'm gonna run through some pros and cons of the game. This is the first time I've done this per se, but I think this might be a little easier for you guys to kind of understand what's going on, why my feelings of the game are the way they are. So, first pro of this game, and this is in no order, like what's better or worse or whatever. Pro number one would have to be the music. This game is set in 1987, I believe, pretty certain, and there's a lot of synth retro wave tracks on here. Again, you're a DJ, so you can throw in some tracks when you go to commercial break, which is a nice touch. The music in the game is pretty dang good and it fits the setting really well. Another pro would have to be the art style they chose. It made a lot of sense. Nothing too fancy, but again, it does the job and it's very I would say tasteful to look at, and the color palette and all that, it just feels like it's supposed to be there. Nothing too complicated though, graphic wise. The writing in the game was actually surprised me some. Without going into any crazy details, there are a lot of branching paths based on the dialogue. People will die or not based on your actions. Thankfully, there's a few save slots, so you can, if you make a wrong choice, you can easily load back. And the game's like runs smooth as butter. Loading and everything is quick as can be, so there's no issues with that. Um, Other than that, like the game itself is pretty solid. The only problem really is that and I'll go into that in a minute, is that there's not a lot to do when you're on the phone talking to people because you are like filling in as a 911 operator. You learn this at the very beginning of the game. It's not a spoiler at all. So there's not really a lot to do. You are confined to your station for the most part the entire game, minus some again loose exploration. And that's actually where the game kind of gets a little interesting, is when you can explore the studio. So let's go ahead and go through the cons real quick. There's not a lot of cons in the game. Again, like you don't do much in the game. You sit around the booth, but that's okay. The game's not trying to make you do some grandiose like adventure, so not really a con. The first con, then true con, I would say, is that you can't skip through dialogue on multiple playthroughs, so you have to sit there and listen through everything, which not a huge deal, but still, if you want to go back through and play it multiple times, you're going to be stuck doing that. So another con would have to be there's a lot of idle time, so that goes on to what I just said. Since you can't skip dialogue, you're going to be sitting here, and there's not a lot to do when you're sitting here. You can shoot hoops. You see the bin over there with a basketball goal. That's all you can really do. You can tap the boom on the microphone. You can walk around in this room. But when you're on the phone, you can't do much. So, yeah, that's not great. Another thing is, when you are running around the studio, you can't sprint unless I'm dumb. I checked the controls. There is no sprint, and the walking animation is fairly slow. So it would have been nice to be able to sprint, especially since it's a horror game. You would think they would allow you to run. Not going to go into why, but yeah. And then the game, besides a couple of points, is not really that scary. Whether that's because of the art style or because of just the way they have it set up, maybe they're more going for a campy story. Yeah. So that is pretty much the only cons I have. Yeah, there are a couple moments where you have a little bit of a jump scare, but yeah, so not a bad game at all. I had a pretty good time with it, and my score might shock you guys. I've been going like on the 7.58 scale, but I think I'm going to change that a little bit because that doesn't give a lot of room in between. So I'm actually going to give this game a 7.75. I think they did a pretty good job with it, and Team 17 should be proud. And if you go check out the other reviews, they're pretty solid. I'm not in the minority here, so if you want to play a narrative puzzle like horror game with a lot of dialogue and writing, give this game a shot. Killer Frequency. Very nice, solid game. 7.75.